On the Africa room, no seed biting, never bites. Fast water women in the girls down in the guys. Final seat, black, you right, red, white. OMG, Mac 4, Robin C, Gallon, Egg Night. Hot stove, talk, Robin C, bringing the high. EC's alive, plus trust under those in my city life. White. Queens got the dreams united. On the rag, Trump out, bring me stack. Night and under that chocolate flag. Smack that home out the park. Rock the deafening black. Side game time, Robin CP time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remains cheer in the orange, we unite. Match forever. I'm 50 in sight. Match bright and high. Energy like a live wire. Queen City chance. Passion never tires. Grand slam dreams and paces folding fast. Holding it steady, cause we know we gonna last. We the kings of the field, time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remain cheer in the orange, we unite. Match forever, I'm 50 in sight. All hearts ignite like NYC stars. Robin CP, guiding even through scars. Queens got the glow, city anthem flows.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to episode 27 of the Mets Hot Stove Show. And the hot stove is finally heating up for the New York Mets as the Mets made a couple of sign-ins the last time we spoke, and it was kind of a cold hot stove. But finally, we're getting some noise, and it only took for the Mets and Pete Alonso to part ways for at least right now to make some movements in the Mets front and to fix their roster and make their roster better. So we're going to get started. As you can see, we got a ton of topics, the most amount of topics we had on the hot stove. Chris, how you doing, buddy?
Jam-packed show. It's an awesome way to spend a Friday night. We appreciate everyone being here with us. David Stearns listens to our Mets Hot Stove Lives and the True Mets Talk podcast because he got my guy, AJ Minter, in the house. I love it. I love it. This is a great way to end the Friday. Lots of videos on the channel. I'm only 2 subscribers away, a little bit of a shameless plug, from 2,000 subscribers on the channel. So if anybody can help me out, that'd be great. But we got a lot to talk about. Again, the Mets are making moves. You should have known they wouldn't be done, not by a large margin. And guess what? Even with this Minter and Winker signing, they're still not done. Let's get into it.
Yeah, and that was the frustrating part of this whole process. Was it was clear that the Pete Alonso situation was holding up what the Mets were trying to do and to move forward with other signings. Because if anybody didn't realize, the Winker and Minter physicals are done. Like they already had this probably set up already, but we're just waiting for the Pete Alonso situation to come to a head and come to, I guess, a conclusion, or at least for now. So as quickly as these physicals happen, all right, the Mets already tweeted out the Winker signing and the Minter signing. The physicals are done. So it just shows you how like this was already in play. And now that's what I'm saying, that we even talked about it on the last hot stove. If this deadline that the Mets supposedly had, and now it's clearly true, how fast things were going to happen. And again, what is it, an hour after the Alonso situation, the Mets signed Jesse Winker to a 1-year, $8 million deal. And listen, we talked about, like, we didn't think Winker, he could have been on his way out, right? We were talking about that for multiple hot stoves, that Jesse Winker is definitely a guy that is, is a badass, right? He brings that energy, he brings that emotion, he brings that attitude that the Mets were lacking last season, right? Iglesias calmed everybody down with the OMG and his lightheartedness and his flair. But the Mets needed that attitude, and Winker did bring that at the trade deadline. And obviously, we're all happy. Excited is a strong word. Happy that Winker is back, because he does provide needs in multiple aspects, regardless of what the Mets do the rest of this offseason offensively. Winker is needed. He's probably, at the moment, platooning with Starlin Marte at DH, and obviously can fill in at the right field and left field positions when needed. So what are your thoughts on the Winker re-signing?
Oh, I love it, man. Not only the attitude and just the clubhouse vibe that he brings that you just alluded to, but also the clutch numbers. I mean, he had a little bit of, his own struggles in the Mets uniform that was kind of it was very evident when he first came to Queens. It took him a little bit to get going. Actually, he got going to a pretty decent standard, and then he kind of hit a wall, especially in September, right before the playoffs. It was like a 3 for 42 stretch, if I remember correctly, and we were wondering like how much playing time was he really going to get in the playoffs, and that was something I was concerned about. But again, in the playoffs, alongside Mark Vientos, this guy Jesse Winker produced with the rest of them. I mean, the discipline. You take a look at Jesse Winker in his career and the on base percentage of sorts, right? Like he gets on base. Now, when we get into some of the other names in this, in this topic list, I'm not sure I'm comfortable of putting Jesse Winker in the 5 spot to be, behind whoever the cleanup batter is, right? That's a little bit of a stretch, but this guy is a fantastic number 6 hitter. I mean, he can bat 5 depending on what the lineup assortment is from Carlos Mendoza. I'm not going to put it past him, but you're right. The purpose that he serves right now, in my eyes, is not the pivot point from Pete Alonso. It was really, even if it was Pete Alonso, right? I still think Jesse Winker would have gotten brought back. I really do. Because if they really are interested in keeping Starling Marte on this team and deploying this platoon at DH, which I'm a little bit skeptical about still, I'll get into that here in just a second when we talk about one of these other names. But if that's the goal, and that's exactly how he fits in perfectly, right? He can be a corner outfielder on some occasions if Nimmo needs to get some time off of his feet, but you're really bringing him in to be platoon lefty option at the DH spot. And I'm perfectly okay with him being that. And the other thing about it is he liked being a New York Met so much. He could have gotten a couple of $1 million more elsewhere. I guarantee it. I guarantee he could have. $8 million on a 1-year deal. He's not even that old, if I'm not mistaken. What is he, like 31? Maybe 32 years old, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around there. Someone fact check me on that. I'm not entirely sure. But he wanted to be a New York Met. So he took the 1 year, $8 million. He's bought into this clubhouse, and we talk about it constantly. And I say all the time, we want guys that want to be in a Mets uniform and come embrace New York. We want those types of guys. So salute to Jesse Winker. So happy that he's back again. He's going to have a decent contribution on this team again. I'm still expecting him to be a platoon player, not an everyday player, and he got paid as such. We'll see what the next move is.
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. You're 100% right. He probably could have got a $10-11 million deal and start somewhere on a bad team. Like, let's be honest. A contending team is not going to have Jesse Winker starting in the corner outfield. Like, it's just not going to happen. Maybe a DH, but I don't think they would give $10-11 million to a DH, that a guy who really can't hit lefties. So, yeah, he clearly took less money to come back to the Mets, and that's a good thing, because look, I don't want to face off against Jesse Winker. I'm not saying he's Ohtani or anything like that, or even Pete Alonso for that matter. But he is a guy that gets under the skin of other teams. And you need that, especially in the NL East. That's going to be a badass division. That is going to be a tough division. You're going to need a guy like that, brings that attitude. Like I said earlier, you need that, right? So many times the Mets got punched in the face and never got back up and fought back. They fought back, and Winker was a big part of that. So I like the signing of Jesse Winker. And it's only the beginning, and I don't think the Winker has anything to do with any other options when it comes to a possible another bat. I think the Mets are still going to get another bat, and we'll obviously get into that topic a little bit later.
Saki went to the Dodgers, by the way, officially. Everyone's reporting it.
Oh
Jeff
my
Passan.
God! I can't believe that's breaking news. Like, come on. Like,
and by the way, the Blue Jays, in freeing up $2 million more of extra space, they really thought they had a chance at him. Another free agent that passes up an opportunity to go to Toronto.
Look, I'm gonna tell you this right now. I feel so bad for the Toronto Blue Jays, because they've really tried, and you know what? It's unfortunate because they're in Toronto. That's the issue. Like, that is, if they were anywhere else in the country, and if they would have spent money and would have been willing to spend money like the owner has been. Look, it's just, we talk about demographic when it comes to these Japanese players. The demographic in Canada is a problem with the situation going on in Canada, which the tax that is much higher than anywhere in the United States. it's a problem, and people don't want to go out of country. Like they just don't want to. It's a pain in the ass just to go back home to wherever they're from. Just you know what I'm saying? It's a problem, and it's unfortunate because I would like them to get certain guys, and maybe this pushes them more to pay Alonso a lot more than what the Mets were willing to do. Maybe that's what they're going to try to do now. But I'm telling you this right now, I don't think the Blue Jays are going to go get Pete Alonso. I don't think they're going to offer him that much more money. I still think Pete Alonso is going to pop back up, to be quite honest. But we'll see that if that actually does happen. But Chris, your guy AJ Minter, right?
Oh,
You would have want to brought it up. I made sure on the breaking news live stream that I had to give you credit because you brought this guy up before anybody brought him up. And it was the number one target for you. Because I think if the Mets were always in from the beginning on Tanner Scott, maybe you would have had a difference of opinion. But I think you really like AJ Minter, and it's hard not to like AJ Minter. But Gad, I'm going to give you the floor on this one. Mets AJ Minter, 2 years, $22 million.
I'm going to try to put out a video tomorrow just to break it all down. But again, I started talking about AJ Minter 2 months ago in one of my first off-season videos. I talked about him 11 days ago where I named him my number one option in the bullpen. This guy was always on my radar for the New York Mets to go ahead and swoop in and take him right underneath out from the Atlanta Braves. And Atlanta Braves fans, being quite upset in what I'm seeing over on X on the timeline, that signifies a good thing because they hold AJ Minter nearly, or at least they did, nearly and dearly to their hearts. I mean, he's a World Series champion for that organization. He has a breadth of playoff experience for that organization as well. And again, this guy's a 3-pitch pitcher. And you take a look at his Savant page, he has success in all 3 of his pitches. I've talked about this before. I'll talk about it again. Stacking flexible arms. He's got closing experience. He's got setup experience. He's got 7th inning experience. And that allows the Mets to just push down everybody else down the ladder. Daniel Nunez, 7th inning. Reed Garrett, 6th inning. Jose Butto, 5th inning / long man. I mean, really, it just allows so much more flexibility. And it's hard to believe that the Mets are done in the bullpen. I mean, maybe it's not a major signing, right? Maybe it's not a major signing. I don't know. I think that they can still go ahead and strike a deal for Robertson or Canley. Maybe they go a little bit of a cheaper route, which is still in play for me, and I think it'd be fine if they re-sign Ryan Stanek. Again, just creating the most flexibility as possible for Carlos Mendoza to utilize. And again, with having closer experience, the same thing could be said for Tanner Scott. If there's a matchup that Carlos Mendoza likes and he prefers Edwin Diaz in against the opposition in the 8th inning, he can do that and just utilize AJ Minter in the back end of the 9th inning. And you still have a closer with that type of experience. And the 2024 Mets did not have that to their disposal or at their disposal. They had to rely on Jake Diekman, right? Who was basically nothing for the Mets. He had 1 signature save against the Yankees, and that's it. Then you had to rely on Reed Garrett, who came onto the scene out of nowhere and was an elite or almost elite 7th inning guy, but kind of looked uncomfortable. Now you're providing Mendoza with the utmost of options, and I could not be more happy. And again, just the sheer fact that Braves fans are upset at this just tells me how great of an option this is for the New York Mets. And by the way, there has been some concerns about AJ Minter. I know that he's had a little bit of a hip injury. It cut his season short in 2024, around 34 innings pitched. Again, not the full sample size. I think he's going to be ready by spring training. I don't think that's the worry. There's some concerns from Mets fans about the decrease in velocity, but again, he doesn't have any walk issues. He still has a strikeout rate that it's above league average. He's got good movement on his pitches. And again, 4-seam fastball, cutter, changeup, those 3 pitches is all you need. You take a look at the OPS against, the batting average against, and it's all elite for AJ Minter. Love this signing. 2 years, $22 million. It's a bargain of a deal, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it is. And, with that heavy sinker and with the infield, especially, I still think the Mets are going to get somebody, a big bat in this lineup. If it's not Pete Alonso, I still believe that. And I'm kind of leaning back towards Bregman again because of the fact that the reports keep on coming out about Vientos, the Mets' willingness and think that Vientos can play first base were not an issue. I think they're not going internally at third base because it really doesn't make sense. If Mauricio is not ready to go, I don't see them moving Acuna to third base, and I don't see Jet Williams ready yet. So where else are they going internally? Brett Beatty, I find that very hard to believe. Very hard to believe that Brett Beatty is going to be the starting third baseman for the New York Mets. So you're looking at outside options. I think the internal options is more of a media-driven way because I think the media is kind of more on the side of the Pete Alonso, that they're blaming the Mets more than Pete Alonso here, and they're just using that just to get at Met fans a little bit. I don't think the Mets for 1 second think if Mauricio was 100% healthy, I can see them doing that. I really could, because Mauricio is more versatile. He is more athletic. I think he can play third base no problem. He has a great arm, and again, when you have a shortstop, they can play anywhere in the infield. Like, I'm not worried about that. So, but Mauricio is not going to be ready. So you can't go with that uncertainty into the season. It's just not going to happen. So I'm leaning towards the situation where when it comes to the AJ Minter, we got a lot of topics to talk about. Let's go back to AJ Minter. I'm going to ask you this, Chris. Chris Colito, a Red Sox beat reporter, was the one that said the Mets are heavily pursuing Tanner Scott and AJ Minter. He specifically said that an hour before AJ Minter signed. Do you think the Mets are out on another left-handed pitcher named Tanner Scott? I know we'll talk about that at the end, but that's more about the smaller arms. But do you think they're out on Tanner Scott, or you think they're going with that elite bullpen and not messing around?
I heard your live stream earlier today. I know that you believe that Tanner Scott could still be in play. With where the Mets are at in the payroll situation, I think it's around $290 million before you take into account the luxury tax.
Mm-hmm.
So fastly approaching, 300. They're fastly approaching. They're about $10 to $11 million off of going into that third luxury tax penalty. I'm not saying that's the end all be all. And I think that we both can agree that they're going to go over it because we're both still stating that they need another bat and they probably need another reliever. But when you're talking about, and I'm still going to hold true to this, Tanner Scott's going to sign a 4-year deal somewhere, and it's not going to be with the New York Mets. So I will say that this signing, for lack of a better term, out. They're out on Tanner Scott. That's what
you believe that they were in very heavily on Tanner Scott, but when they got their number and the years, they weren't comfortable with, and then they turned to AJ Minter. That's your thought?
I always thought that the Mets were checking in on Tanner Scott and they had the meeting with him because I believe I saw somewhere on X stating that, I think it was maybe even from Martino, stating that, they remain interested in Tanner Scott, but the interest is said to be significant if he's willing to take a short-term deal. So there was some sort of report out there stating that he could take a short-term deal, and that's where maybe the Mets could cash in. And once probably they got wind of the fact that he still wants a 3 to 4 year deal, I think that's when they pivoted to AJ Minter, who's not a bad consolation prize.
No,
again, he has my full support. So I do think, again, at the end of the day, you'll see Tanner Scott sign. I mean, the reliever market is cooking right now. It's cooking right now. So you could probably see him sign sooner rather than later, especially with the Sasaki decision going final and, just within the past, 10 minutes or so. I do think he's going to sign a 4-year deal, and I don't think it's going to be with the New York Mets. So I will just say that.
Yeah, and Leclerc signed a $10 million deal with the A's. So again, a couple of bullpen arms are off the board now. And again, I still think Stearns got something cooking when it comes to the bullpen. Maybe if it's not Tanner Scott, maybe it's another high-end reliever like a Kirby Yates. I still think, because you still need another righty at least 2 more arms, at the very least 1 really good arm. Is it Robinson? Is it Canely? Is it Stanek? Is it Yates? I still think that's a possibility as well. But again, if you don't like the AJ Minter signer as a Mets fan, you're too obsessed with the wrong situation. You're more looking at just, they picked Minter over Tanner Scott. But you got to look at the production. Stop looking at the names and just look at the production. And yeah, the hip injury was an issue last year, but when he did pitch, he was really damn good. and his velo is down. And I don't know, did he have hip surgery?
I'm not sure if he had the full surgery or not. I know that it was the hip, but again, I have to go back and look. I don't know if he actually had a procedure done.
I think I searched. I just want to do a quick search on it. I think it was,
Well, while you're searching that up, because I think that's very important to just like see what the timeline is going to be. Because again, I think what was reported is that he's going to be ready. If not spring training, then definitely opening day. But let's take a look at. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just looked at it now on MLB.com. September 9th. AJ Minter will be on crutches for the next 6 weeks as he recovers from the season-ending left hip surgery. He went last month. So we had the hip surgery in August. So it's a similar surgery than David Peterson had.
I was going to say just that.
So if David Peterson came back healthy and confident in his hip, obviously he pitched well, then you would have the confidence that AJ Minter should be ready to go. And the Mets already did the physical. They're comfortable with the hip. And if they had the same surgery as Peterson, the Mets know very well what's going on with that hip and what that surgery recovery is. So he should be ready to go. And obviously the Mets feel comfortable, obviously, that they signed him. And what were you saying?
Well,
you were going on. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, first of all, off that point, the Mets aren't the Blue Jays. They're not going to hand out a contract knowing that there have been failed physicals before, if there's something off with the physical, right? With like they just did, the Toronto Blue Jays did with Jeff Hoffman. But what I was going to say before that, as it relates to the rest of the bullpen market, and I'll sure we'll talk about that before the rapid fire, is that let's take a look at these names that you just mentioned just a couple minutes ago. Yeah. Yates, Robertson, and who was the other guy that you mentioned? Yates, Robertson, and who? Canley, right? Yeah. Those guys are going to be short-term deals. Yates and Robertson are definitely signing one-year deals. Canley can probably get something similar to what AJ Minter just signed. I would probably imagine. And if you take a look at a 2-for-1 option, Tanner Scott for $20 million, maybe even plus at like 21 or something like that, versus AJ Minter and Stanek, Robertson, Yates, or whoever else. That's basically a 2-for-1 deal right there. And again, Stanek is the cheaper option of all three of those guys. Yeah. But that's kind of my sentiment, is that the short-term deals for the bullpen have always been the Mets' MO, has always been David Stern's MO. Again, outside of Edwin Diaz. So I really do think after AJ Minter, great deal, by the way, they're still going to go after maybe a 1-year deal or a 2-year deal. I don't rule out, listen, with the connection that the Mets have had to ex-Yankees pitchers, I do not rule out Tommy Canley for the New York Mets. And there's been some interest there.
Yeah, and Canley was really good with the Yankees, and he had an injury rating year last year. But when he did pitch for the Yankees last year, when he came back late in the season and in the postseason, he was damn good. So if the Mets feel confident he's healthy, that is another flame-throwing arm that you have that you can pitch him. He was a guy that was pitching the 7th and 8th inning for the Yankees, and he closed once in a blue moon. So this guy can pitch different innings, and this is the idea of a bullpen. This is why I like not giving crazy contracts to big bullpen arms all over the place, because of the fact that, it's so hit or miss with a lot of these bullpen arms that these 1-year, 2-year prove it, or 2-year with an opt-out type deals work, because they're always pitching for another contract. And the good news about this is that, the versatility with all of these guys, the guys that we have in the bullpen right now, every one of these guys, Nunez, Buto, Minter, Reed Garrett, every one of those guys can pitch in the 8th inning if needed. They can pitch in the 6th. They can pitch in the 7th. They can pitch in the 5th inning if need be, right? They all can do it. Obviously, right now, Minter's probably the 8th inning guy. But I was talking about this earlier before we get into our next topic with Alonso, that if the Mets do get 2 really good arms, let's say, let's put it out there, Kirby Yates and Stanek, right? That solidifies your bullpen. I think everybody would be excited about that bullpen. It's a very good, if not top 5 bullpen in baseball, maybe even top 3 bullpen in baseball easily. Would you move Jose Buto to the starting rotation and make him a part of that 6-man rotation?
Easily, yeah, 100%. I've been on record saying that.
I agree with that. Like that's what I was saying. Like, I know I said Tanner Scott and say like a Stanek. If that happens, that's obvious. You're going to throw Buto in the rotation. I wonder if the Mets are thinking like that. That's why I don't think the Mets are out on Tanner Scott officially. I think they're still kind of in on him because, again, we don't know if other teams around the league are shying away from a 4-year deal from Tanner Scott, right? If that's the case, the Mets might pop in on a 3-year deal and maybe even give him an opt-out after this year. Like, that might be a little enticing to him. And if they get Tanner Scott and throw a Stanek in there or a Robinson in there, Buto can easily go to the starting rotation. And now I feel a little bit more, I'm not going to say happy about the rotation, but I'd be a little bit more comfortable with that rotation because Jose Buto was good as a starter. He just didn't give me the length that I think the Mets needed. If you can stretch him out in spring training and not really have an innings limit per se, with the 6-man rotation, you're not really going to have to worry about that too much. You can throw him 6 innings in a game and 7 innings if he's really good. You're not going to have to worry about that. So this dynamic of where the Mets can go in the bullpen, and again, I never worried about David Stearns with the bullpen. I said that from day one of the offseason. He knows what he's doing with the bullpen. He got a bad rap last year for no reason when the majority of the guys in the bullpen that he inherited got hurt. And they were actually good prior to getting hurt. And he had to fix the bullpen on the fly, and it was way before the deadline. So the Mets struggled with that because there was nowhere to trade because nobody was trading anybody yet. So, look, Minter's a good signing. Some people might be mad about the Tanner Scott situation. I don't think that's out of the question yet. But if it is, it's not the end of the world because Minter is damn good, and he definitely can be a setup man and the bridge guy for Edwin Diaz. All right, next up, guys, we're going to talk about him again, maybe even one more time. Who knows? But according to multiple sources, the Mets and Alonso seem like they've parted ways. The Mets gave their final offer, so to speak. There was a report earlier today that they might up it a few more $1 million. I mean, we might get excited here a little bit. But it seems like the Mets have moved on. I still think Pete Alonso is going to crawl back some way, somehow. I don't think the Blue Jays are going to overpay for Pete Alonso. I'd be shocked if they do. I don't think it's a smart signing for them. I really don't. But again, who cares about the Blue Jays until we talk about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. But Pete Alonso and the Mets have moved on, right? Obviously, the Mets already made moves after that report came out. What are your final thoughts? I know you made a video about it. If people didn't see a video, check it out. But give them your overall thought process of this. I know you did say that it was a low ball offer. I kind of disagree, but what are your thoughts on that?
First of all, shout out to Pure Journal Sports with the super chat. Congrats on 2K subs. The channel finally hit 2K subs. I definitely appreciate it. Thank you for the support on the True Mets Talk podcast. Everyone hit the like and subscribe to both of our channels. Thank you so much, John. Please, if you're not subscribed to Pure Journal Sports, make sure you go ahead and subscribe. Regular Mets in-season streams. Does a great job. Great guy. Appreciate you, John. Thank you so much. Listen, I think it was a lowball offer in the sense, and I wasn't trying to insinuate that I thought that it was a clear-cut lowball offer in my video. So if anybody perceived it that way, again, that wasn't really the intention. I just know that a lot of this fan base probably was going to think that it was a lowball offer. But if you listen to the video, I stated that the Mets, they did this the right way, to be honest with you, because even to this day, 6:31 p.m. on January 17th, we don't have any word that Pete Alonso has any offers elsewhere around the league. And so if the Mets don't have to go up from $23.5 million, why would they bid against themselves?
Correct.
Why would they do it? And you know what? We've already seen it with Juan Soto and Scott Boras. And the same thing is going to apply here with Pete Alonso.
Yeah.
I'm not ruling out at all. I don't care what Heyman said. I don't care what Martino said. I'm not ruling out at all that the Mets and Pete Alonso figure this out. Because you know what's going to happen? What's going to happen is Pete Alonso is going to go to Toronto. He's going to get a number from Toronto. And then Boris and Alonso are going to come back to the Mets and give him a final opportunity to match. And then maybe the Mets say yes. Because again, at the end of the day, Pete Alonso knows it's in his best interest to remain a New York Met in this lineup. Because guess what? He has been advocating and pushing for this opt-out year. He's finally come down to 3 years and he wants the opt-out. He's very adamant about that. That tells me he's still hunting for a long-term deal next offseason, even alongside Vlad Jr. when they both hit the market. And I still think he can get it. So he's going to try to put himself in the best situation, in the best lineup to get the best pitches to hit, to have a great season, and potentially get that long-term deal next offseason.
Yep.
Now, is that going to be more likely for him to achieve in a Mets uniform or a Toronto Blue Jays uniform? You tell me, because it's going to be a Mets uniform. I'm going to argue that all day long with the personnel if you stack both lineups side by side. But the interesting thing about this is that we did it. This is the first time, Rob, that we've heard concrete numbers. We've never heard what the numbers have truly been. So $23.5 million is the Mets marker. They said that's their last-ditch effort before they're pivoting to plan B. And so that means Pete Alonso is probably anywhere from like 26, 27, maybe even $28 million if that's the discrepancy. I think we can both agree at the end of the day, if he goes and gets a $25 or $26 million offer from the Toronto Blue Jays, and maybe they're not confident, and we'll talk about Vladdy, we'll talk about Santander, we'll talk about all these guys. If they're not confident in their ability to pivot, if they get a sense that Santander doesn't really want to come to Queens, maybe they don't even have enough roster space for him because they still got Starling Marte clogging things up. Maybe they'll go up to 25 or 26. Will Salmon also did report late last night that the Mets counteroffer did have an opt-out, at least one, which is what Alonso wanted. And also he did confirm that the Mets would be willing to go above, a little bit above the $68 to $70 million range on a 3-year deal, which probably puts them, if I'm just guessing and assuming here, around $25 million AAV, maybe as their max point, maybe.
Yeah.
He doesn't have any other offers.
Well, that's the thing, though. That's why I get upset about a lot of Mets fans. Like, why are you going to give somebody money that, even if they might deserve it or might not deserve it, why are you going to bid against yourself? By the way, guys, who's bid against themselves along baseball? Even the Yankees didn't bid against themselves with Aaron Judge until they absolutely had to. The same thing for Max Fried. The Boston Red Sox didn't have to bid against them. The Yankees were like, okay. And look, the Yankees had to go the extra mile. The fact that Boris already said it, his last call is going to be to the New York Mets. I'm telling you guys this right now, if the Toronto Blue Jays offer him $25 million for the 3 years, similar opt-outs that the Mets offered, you don't think the Mets are going to give $1.5, $2 million more per year to retain Pete Alonso? If they don't do that, then clearly they never did want him back. But I'd be shocked if they wouldn't willing to do that, knowing that there's an opt-out there that can, get him get him out of the contract and go after Vladimir Guerrero Jr. So it is a fact that, and the Mets know this, right? We haven't heard, Toronto's discussing whatever they're discussing. Why is it okay for the Mets to check in on a player, but all of a sudden negotiations are happening between Toronto and Pete Alonso? By the way, do you really think Pete Alonso is going to go to Toronto for $2 million more? Come on, guys. You got to think logically here. Pete Alonso's coming back to the New York Mets for a final offer, or if somebody actually gives him an offer, because there's no indication that somebody is. And I'd be shocked if Pete Alonso goes to Toronto, where, could we be clear about this? Toronto's not winning anything. Look, could we be honest about that? Now, I know American League is not very good, but Toronto's not very good. They've proved that year after year after year. And they just lost out on Roki Sasaki. They just lost out on every free agent. So it's going to be Pete Alonso all by him, loans himself, with an agent George Springer, with a rotation that's solid but shown you nothing in the playoffs and can't get to the playoffs. And Vladimir Guerrero is on his way out. So Pete Alonso is going to be all by himself holding the Canadian flag. If that's what he wants to do, go right ahead. But Pete Alonso knows that the Mets are a better team than the Toronto Blue Jays. If there's nobody else out there for Pete Alonso, then guess what? Who's going to be running back and crawling back for the exact offer the Mets are probably going to give him, maybe a few $1 million more? And again, Will Simon did report, like Chris said, they're willing to go a little bit higher. So again, they know that I'm telling you, David Stearns is a masterclass in this situation with Pete Alonso. Now, I don't agree with him on all fronts, especially the starting rotation. But if it comes out that the Toronto Blue Jays are going to offer him a few $1 million more, say $1 or $2 million more, the Mets are already willing to go a couple $1 million more. So David Stearns probably knows the market extremely well for Pete Alonso, and probably knows or has an inkling of what the Blue Jays could offer Pete Alonso. Now, maybe they go a little crazy here because they just lost out on Roki Sasaki and the money's burning in their pockets. And maybe they offer Pete Alonso $30 million a year. Maybe they do that. And good for them. But until he actually signs with another team, I'm not going to believe he's gone until he's gone. I just feel like it's a fact, Chris. It just has to be that way. It makes no other sense.
Yeah, I agree with you. But again, I mean, maybe on the flip side of things, we've said this time and time again. I think on the last Hot Stove we did, it's hard to compete against a desperate team. And maybe the Jays get a sense that they're not going to be able to strike a deal for Vladimir Guerrero. And what I did say in my video earlier today that I released, again, I think it's in my description if you guys missed it, and if you're watching this live, you can watch it afterward, is do you see the progression that's coming out of Toronto? At first, as they were trying to extend Vladdy, and they were actively engaged in talks. I think on 2 separate occasions this offseason, if I'm not mistaken. Failed to do that. Then it was, Pete Alonso is on their radar. They're talking to Pete Alonso, but they're also going to keep Vladimir Guerrero in that case, even if they get Pete Alonso. By some miracle, they're going to convince Vlad to go and shift over to third base, which is laughable. It's laughable.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as of last night, we're hearing that they want a Soto deal from the Yankees, or between the Yankees and Padres. They want that type of deal 2.0 if they're going to let go of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. this offseason. All these progressions are telling me that the Blue Jays understand that Vlad does not want to be in Toronto. No matter how much money they throw at him, he does not want to be in Toronto. Maybe Vlad knows the Mets will give it to him, and he's just going to hold out because he'd rather just play for the Mets. Even if it's like, what, $20, $30 million less. I'm not saying the Mets are going to do that to him, but maybe he knows that. Or maybe he has another preferred destination, not named the New York Mets. I don't know. But I don't get a sense that Vlad wants to stay in Toronto. And I think that this Toronto connection to Pete Alonso is a result of that, because they've already tried extending him twice and engaging in those conversations twice with him this offseason, and they failed miserably. Now, partially that's due to him wanting $400+ million, and that's kind of a hard extension to figure out with such little time. But at the end of the day, was it such little time? They've had an whole offseason to do it.
Well, this is offseason to do it. Like I don't think most people understand, and that when you extend your own player, it's usually getting a little bit of a home friendly discount. Not a massive discount, but somewhat of a discount, right? What you would get on the open market would obviously be more, right? This is similar to a Pete Alonso situation. Pete Alonso thought he was going to get more than what the Mets offered the 7 for $158, right? A team always offers an extension while the player is still under team control because they know they can get some type of a discount. When the player goes to free agency, they never wanted the discount. Like, that's the thing that people don't understand. Like, that's the idea of an extension, right? But Vladimir Guerrero Jr. was willing to listen, and maybe if the Blue Jays blew him away with an offer, he might have took it. But they didn't blow him away. I know $360 million doesn't seem like a little bit of money, but in the eyes of what Vladimir Guerrero was saying, he goes, yeah, I take a discount, but the number has to start with 4. The Blue Jays missed out on that twice already. Why are they all of a sudden going to go to a $400 million extension? They're not going to do that. They might get close, but they're not going to get to $400 million. Because what's the point of the Blue Jays overpaying for an extension for a guy that's already on their team. They're not going to do that unless they necessarily have to. So, and there's no bidding war because he's still not a free agent yet. So it just the understanding part of that extension talks. Same thing with the Juan Soto with the Yankees, right? I got the Yankees. We all know the Yankees went to Juan Soto about extension, but they probably came nowhere near the $500 million mark that supposedly he was going to get. Right? We all believe he was going to get $500 million. The market was so crazy and so competitive that it went to 765 plus. That's why. So an extension is where the team is trying to get a little bit of a discount. That's the idea. That's why a lot of people believe Vlad's gone. Now, if they don't trade him this offseason, maybe they trade him at the deadline. But I still believe, and we'll go to the next topic here, with Vladimir Guerrero Jr., I still believe Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and this whole Mets check-in that was confirmed by multiple sources is more than just a check-in, right? What are you checking in? How many prospects you're going to have to give up? We all know it's going to be a lot, right? I mean, we'll come up with a little trade proposal if we want to here, right? And the report came out that Toronto wants more than what was given up for Juan Soto. Hello. We all know it wasn't a lot for Juan Soto. It was quantity, but not a lot of quality. Other than Michael King and what was it, Drew Thorpe, that was it. Everybody else, Brito and a couple of other schmucks that are not very good. It wasn't a lot. It was a decent reliever that could be a starter, but a decent reliever. Michael King, who was really good, but that was basically it. And Drew Thorpe, who knows what he's going to be? He's a prospect. So they gave up one top 10 prospect, Michael King, who was actually a reliever for the Yankees, who they turned into a starter late in the year, turned out to be really good. Other than that, it was nothing. So one top 10 prospect and a bunch of others with Michael King. So if it's got to be more, the Mets can easily do that with 4 top prospects or 3 top prospects. Chris, do you have a couple of names to throw out there for Vlad, just to make it interesting here?
I mean, the Mets don't have a Michael King-esque type pitcher, at least not that good.
I think if they're going to trade Vlad, they're clearly going to be rebuilding with Pete Alonso.
Well, right. And then a lot of people in this chat are saying that the Blue Jays don't want to rebuild. It doesn't really matter if they don't want to rebuild. Again, at the end of the day, if Vlad doesn't want to be there, he doesn't want to be there. How many free agents have they missed out on that they were willing to throw a bag for? I mean, they can't help where they're at in this market. But again, I mean, so let's assess this. Michael King, MLB ready pitcher, turned into a pretty good starter, right? Again, I don't think anybody knew that Michael King was going to progress to that, or maybe we did, right? Michael King was the headliner, so to speak, of that package. Drew Thorpe, who was 99th on the top 100 MLB prospect list. So that's your top 10 prospect. Then they had the Yankees number 13 overall prospect after that. And then after that, it was just who are those guys, to be honest, right? So you'd have to mitigate the Michael King situation. You have to add more prospects into the fold. But like you said, if the Mets really want Vladdy, and I'm not saying that David Stearns is going to do this, because I'm not sure if he's going to prioritize this or not. Again, it circles back to this whole, let's wait till the next offseason to sign him or not. But they have everything at their disposal to get this deal done. I have no doubt in my mind about that. I don't even want to speculate names, because again, I think Ryan Clifford, as people have said in the chat, is probably a good benchmark as a top 10 prospect to include. Yeah. But other than that, I don't even want to speculate who'd go back. But the Mets have all the tools that it takes to get this deal done. Make no mistake about it. I agree with you there.
Well, how many prospects do you think it would take? Right, it would obviously be a few top 10 prospects. Clearly, like if it's 3 top 10 prospects, regardless of the names, right? Would Brandon Sproat probably be untouchable? Everybody else is probably doable at this point.
One more time.
Besides Brandon Sproat, everybody else is probably available, or at least willing to give up.
Yeah, I would think so in the right deal. I mean, we
Okay,
saw
so
we saw the unwillingness of the Mets to include Jet Williams in that deal for Crochet, but again, I mean, it's two different circumstances here, Crochet versus Vlad. You're talking about a big bat, and it's clear that they need a big bat, although they needed a big arm too. So maybe you throw Jet Williams in that conversation as well. I don't think Jet Williams is untouchable. I think Brandon Sproat, and that's practically it. But maybe you throw Jet Williams. But even if those two guys are untouchable, there's so many other names that the Mets can just choose from to just let go. You know what I mean?
well, that's what I'm saying. Like, there's no reason why David Stearns can't go to Toronto and say, "All right, you want something more valuable than a Juan Soto deal." Understandable, but remember what you just said, right? David Stearns can go right back and say, "Hey, listen, this is what you said. You want a top 5 prospect, a top 20 prospect with that 13th, and a somewhat ready starter that nobody knew he could be a starter, but definitely a really good reliever." That's basically what you're talking about. So, okay, we'll give you 3 top 10 prospects, not Brandon Sproat. Okay, I want Jet Williams, I want Ryan Clifford, and I want Ronnie Mauricio. I will drive them to Toronto. I get my passport ready. I do that in a heartbeat. Because Jet Williams, I don't believe has anywhere to play. We keep on talking about this, right? You get to keep Luis Angel Acuna. You get to keep Brandon Sproat. You get to keep Drew Gilbert, and you get to keep Jonathan, Brandon Sproat, most Tidwell as well. So most of the prospects that you're probably going to be using sooner rather than later over the next year and a half are going to be there and going to be available for you to do what you need to do. And have them just in case if you need 1 or 2 at the deadline to make a major move if you need it. Like that's very possible. That is a better package than what the Yankees gave up for Juan Soto right away. Because Michael King was a very good reliever that late in the year turned starter for the Yankees. Nobody knew what he was going to be. So that's already a better package than what the Yankees gave up for Juan Soto. It's not quantity, it's quality. That's what did I say? What the hell did I say? Jet Williams, which was what, number 3 prospect, 2 prospect?
Yeah.
Ryan Clifford I think he's what, 6 or 7?
Somewhere around there.
And Mauricio's around 5 or 6. So
Yeah.
that's basically 3 top 5 prospects, let's say top 6 prospects in the system. And again, maybe if you can go a little crazy and give somebody, somewhere around top 15, top 20, and maybe it's one of our pitchers that are down the road that you want to throw in there just to make it a little more enticing. Who wouldn't do that trade? Now, there will be prospect huggers. You'll be like, oh my God, how can you get rid of Jet Williams? How can you do that? Well, where's he going to play? Center field? Yeah. That's why you got Drew Gilbert, right? A real center fielder. What are you going to do with him? Play second base? You got Acuna, right? That's what everybody wanted to see anyway, right? Mauricio is a guy that is not going to be ready for the season, so he's not going to help the Mets right now. Maybe he would be really good. But again, you send him to Toronto. Let him beat up on the Yankees. Toronto's not going to be good anyway, so who cares? They're not hurting us. They're in the American League. You're not sending these guys to the National League who can actually hurt you right now. So it's very possible that could be a thought process with David Stearns because, again, David Stearns has not traded top prospects yet. So I'm not gonna believe it when I see it. But at some point, there is too many prospects similar to the positions you already have blocked for a long time. And already prospects that like Acuna. Now, if they want Acuna, I'm not going to be hesitant about it. If they want to flip Acuna for Mauricio instead, I still do that. Maybe you don't agree with me, Chris, with that. But
yeah, I mean,
as long as we have one of our top prospect infielders like a Mauricio, put it this way, Williams, Acuna, let me throw Williams out of there. I put Williams in there. Acuna or Mauricio, I have to have at least one of them left in my infield. I think that's fair to say. But let's go. Jet Williams, Mauricio Acuna, either one, and Ryan Clifford, and throw a top 15 to 20 pitching prospect in there as well. Let's go. Throw Matt Allen, who's finally pitching. I mean, it's crazy to say, but again, he's still considered a prospect, which is crazy, but he's finally throwing after like 4 years. So
my question is that we've already established, I think we both agree the Mets have what it takes. And I think, again, if not for Vladdy, then for who? Because there is a logjam of positions. Right. They have to identify, whether it's this year or next year, they have to identify some prospects to offload for a guy they really want. And what better time, if Pete Alonso is if they're really letting Pete Alonso walk, what better time to do so than right now? So we've already established the Mets can do it. It's possible. It's more than possible, actually. Do you think they will? What's your confidence level that David Stearns will do it?
He hasn't done something like this yet. So it's hard to say I'm confident in it. I mean, I'm confident that they should, but I don't know. Maybe, you see, I don't think you check in for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. without knowing the possibility of what you have to give up, right? David Stearns is not stupid here. Will he do it? Knowing that he could be a free agent, which I don't think Cohen will allow that to happen, similar to the Lindor situation. I'm going to say yes. Because I think David Stearns realized that the Mets, regardless, are going after Vladimir Guerrero Jr. next offseason. Like, that's a fact. Regardless of what the Mets do. They can bring in Anthony Santander, put him at first base. They can throw Vientos to first base, sign Alex Bregman. They could do all that. They're going after Vladimir Guerrero Jr. What they did with Pete Alonso and the offer they gave tells you that they rather go after Vladimir Guerrero long-term. That's just a fact. So I'm going to say yes, but hesitantly, if that's any confidence. But I think he's be willing to do it. I just think, how far will he go? Right? If the guys I mentioned, if he's going to shy away from that, it's not going to happen. But I don't know who he likes or dislikes. Like, we don't know that. Like, Brandon Sproat probably is the only guy that I think he's 100% not giving up, which I agree with, by the way. Other than that, I think I'm going to say yes. I'm confident. Let me just shut up. I'm going to say I'm confident.
I don't know if I'm too confident in it, to be honest with you. This brings me back to the Pete Alonso thing, because again, if Pete Alonso's adamant about wanting to go back onto the market, which we can only assume that he does want to do, you give him that opt-out, he goes back onto the market, you can still go ahead and pursue Vlad Jr. anyways next season. You know what I mean? So that's the disconnect for me.
But here's the thing, though. The Mets can wait this out completely until what date?
February 17th, around.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. They could do that. Can Pete Alonso really wait for that? Because if Toronto is like, you know what, we're just not going to do it, they can sign Santander and Bregman tomorrow. If they do that, Pete Alonso is probably not a question for them anymore. And guess where Pete Alonso is going? Right? So the Mets can wait this out. Like, they can sign Alex Bregman. They can sign Anthony Santander. Right? They can sign Tanner Scott. They can sign Kirby Yates or a couple of other bullpen arms and be perfectly fine with Pete Alonso not being able to sign. Because if Toronto signs Bregman or Santander, they're out on Pete Alonso. That's a fact. Because if you sign Alex Bregman, he's going to third base. Vlad's staying at first, at least this year. You sign Anthony Santander, you can put him in the outfield, but you can also put him at first base and move Vlad to third base. They could do that if they wanted to, and if Vlad wanted to. So
that's the second question right there is the bigger issue, the bigger problem with that idea.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's why I don't believe the Blue Jays on with the Toronto with the Pete Alonso situation, right? We heard it speculated, but who's really brought that up about Toronto being in talks with Pete Alonso? John Heyman has been talking a lot about that.
Yeah.
Who's the mouthpiece for John Heyman? Scott Boras. Right? So we don't know if this is actually true. Now, maybe it comes up that it's really serious and we'll see. But I don't know. I just think that the Mets can wait this out for Pete Alonso. If Pete Alonso runs back in the middle of February, we're going to really know what's going to be going on, because February 17th is the date that Vlad gave where spring training officially starts. He's not negotiating anymore. And if they don't strike a deal, which I don't think is going to happen, the Mets could be waiting in the wings here. And yeah, they can still bring back Alonso and just wait until next year for Vlad. But they also could say, Pete, we don't want you anymore. You wasted our time. You played your hand poorly, by the way. And we're going to go get Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And we got the prospects to do it.
They could do that. They could do that. Or they can go after the names that we're going to be talking about in the next topic. I mean,
Bingo,
you never know.
right?
I don't see one
Bregman.
particular name. I don't see one particular name in here. I actually tweeted about him earlier today. I'll actually post a video about him over the weekend.
Yeah, bring
For
him
those
up.
of you who don't like the name might want to just cover their ears and maybe not tune into that episode. But
Yeah, bring it up.
let's talk Santander and Bregman first, and then we can get into that name just very briefly.
So at the moment, right, we don't have a first baseman. Technically, we got Vientos. Let's say we don't at the moment. Vientos is still the third baseman, but it's clear that the Mets are willing to move Vientos to first base. If you had to choose, again, this is not what Stearns might do. If you had to choose one more bat that's going to be on this team, and it's going to be one of these two guys, who do you want? And why?
Great question.
Damn, that should have been my rapid fire. That was a good one.
It should have been the rapid fire, because I mean, I'm good with either of these guys again for various reasons. I mean, I can select a reason for both of these guys probably not being New York Mets when it's all said and done, but I like both of these names. And you can also, it depends on the actual contract value and the length of it, I should say.
Correct.
Santander,
as well.
right, and Santander at the absolute most value is probably getting a 4-year deal. Bregman at his absolute most value is probably getting a 6-year deal. You know what I mean? So are the Mets willing to go 6 years? I'm not convinced, but at that point you have a very solidified left side of the infield that you don't have to worry about for quite some time. And that's probably why I would choose Bregman. But I think that maybe, what do you think? I'm actually going to flip this back on you, because Bregman, if you do sign Bregman to a 6-year deal, let's say you give him $200 million, do you think that dissuades the Mets from pursuing Vlad Jr. next offseason?
Not at all.
You don't think so?
No, because all the extra money is coming off the books from other players, right? You're going to have Winker off the books. You're going to have a couple of pitchers off the books as well that are on 1-year deals or opt-out deals as well. There's money coming off the books. And I think they would do that because, again, if you get Bregman, first base is available. You can get Vladdy and throw Vientos to the DH. And, eventually play Vientos at third base and first base occasionally to give days off for guys or DH guys and, work around that. But Bregman makes sense. I think Bregman makes sense because what have the Mets talked about? Defense, right? They want somebody better defensively. Who is out there that has been better defensively than Bregman? And they said they want better than Vientos. So who's better than Vientos that is available right now at their base? Nobody internally.
Defensively.
Say that again?
Offensively, defensively, what are we talking about?
Defensively.
Free agent wise, because I can name you one name right now that nobody's gonna like that I want to tell that we're gonna talk about.
I think I know what you're talking about, but yeah.
Yeah, it's Nolan Arenado. It's Nolan Arenado.
Well, he's not a free agent; he's a trade, right?
He's a trade. Yeah, we're exactly right. That's a very easy trade to make if the Mets really wanted to.
That can definitely happen because of the price tag. That's not very expensive for a guy that if you put him between Vientos and Soto could have a better season. I think we can all probably me and you might agree with that.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, okay. I know most people won't in the chat, but I think Arenado is probably a last after Bregman signs and the Mets don't get Anthony Santander. I can see them going to Arenado. There was smoke from the very beginning of the offseason with the Mets and Bregman for whatever reason. But I think the goal here was Vientos. They want to move Vientos off at third base. I'm not sure why. Maybe they already foreseen this situation with Pete Alonso, right? We don't know how long the Mets and Pete Alonso have been talking about this stuff, right? They probably seen this coming for a while with Pete Alonso after signing Scott Boras. Like there might have been, hints that this was going to happen with Pete Alonso and the Mets. And the Mets knew that. And if the Mets are so willing to move Vientos to first base and are saying they want better glove defensively, sure, Arenado could definitely be there. He's still one of the best defensive players at third base, Gold Glover, all that. But Bregman is the guy to get because he's not only going to solidify that left side of the infield, he's still a very good bat. And if you pair him with Soto and Vientos in the middle of this order, that is a damn good lineup. And I know people are going to say, well, how are you going to get that production that you get from Pete Alonso? All right, let's do the math. You replaced Alonso with Juan Soto. You also add Alex Bregman, already a better lineup. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're not wrong.
Okay, so let's say you're going to stick with the 25 home runs from Bregman. Let's go on the lower end. I think he can hit closer to 30, but let's say 25. Soto, you could say 30 home runs, right? I'm not saying 40 home runs. That's a little nuts. Let's say 30 home runs. If you do the math, that's 55 home runs. That is at least 10 more home runs that I think Pete Alonso can hit more. So if Pete Alonso goes crazy and hits 45 home runs, the Mets are still having 10 more home runs in their lineup with a deeper lineup with two guys instead of just Alonso. Let's say Alonso has a great year, 120 RBIs. Bregman, 85 RBIs. Soto, 90 RBIs. Let's do the math. That's closer to 180 RBIs. That's 60 RBIs more than Pete Alonso with your deeper lineup. So that production is better than Alonso's one guy. Now you have two guys spreading out that lineup. That means Vientos is a little further in the lineup behind Bregman. You got Nimmo. You got Alvarez. That's already six guys. Sorry, that's seven guys. Excuse me. And whoever you want to put 8th and 9th. Let's say if it is McNeil and then Siri. That's seven guys in the lineup. With Alonso, that's only one guy. That means everybody's getting pushed up. That means Nimmo's getting pushed up. Alvarez getting pushed up. McNeil's getting pushed up. That's the difference with two guys instead of one. It might not be overall numbers for one guy over another, but when you pair two guys that are better hitters overall and clutch, by the way, it's a huge difference, Chris. That's what people have to understand.
I will say this, just to go off of Steven's point here, I definitely 100% did say that if it came down to Pete Alonso still being in the mix, if I had to choose between Alonso and Bregman, that I would choose Pete. I still back that sentiment up. But
Sure.
at least I'm talking about this in the light that Pete Alonso's gone. The Mets are accepting that Pete Alonso's gone, and then we have to choose between Bregman and Santander. That's the argument we're having, not so much Pete Alonso versus, but just stating that even if Pete Alonso walks, it's not the end-all be-all. So I think that's a little bit misconstrued. And again, I would still take Pete. I don't know if Rob agrees, but I take Pete over Bregman, but I would still do it.
Only because of the contract. Because you would have to give probably 5 or 6 years to Bregman when you would have to give 3 to Alonso and with an opt-out. Like, that's the difference. Not because of the player. I trust me. If it was based on player, I'd rather have Bregman because I think he could do more overall with the lineup that we have because Pete Alonso's a power hitter. That's all he is. Like, we forget he has been declining 3 years in a row. Average declining 3 years in a row. Power declining 3 years in a row. OPS declining. Every other stat declining. Higher strikeouts, lower walks. Everything that you look. Clutch situations getting worse. Like, all of that is why the Mets are not giving Pete Alonso a long-term deal. Like, if they had to choose between short-term deal Pete Alonso and Alex Bregman, even if it is a 6-year deal, I think they actually might go Alex Bregman. Like, I would be shocked if they.
I don't know if I agree with that.
I think because of the player and the overall player, I think they might. Now again, if it's Bregman or Pete, I go Pete. Just because I just think you know what he's going to give you, and throwing him in the lineup, he can't. Even if he has a season like last year, you would hope it would still be good enough for this lineup with Juan Soto addition.
Can I push back on that just a little bit before I tell you why I think Santander is the easier route, especially if you're prioritizing Vlad Jr. I'm just looking at Alex Bregman, and to your point of Pete Alonso's numbers declining, I'm looking at an OPS that's declining for Alex Bregman as well.
Great.
And I'm looking at RBIs that are basically declining. Well, I mean, Bregman did not have a good season at all in 2024. Let's not get it twisted. 768 OPS, 75 RBIs. Yeah, he produced 26 home runs, but he didn't really have a good season to the standards. The OBP from 2023 to 2024 went from 363 to 315. I mean, you can argue that he's also on a decline a little bit too. I mean, can you not?
Agree.
It's the same scenario.
Pete Alonso had 3 declining years in a row, and it got progressively worse. Go back 2 years ago with Bregman. I guarantee it was much better.
No, the OPS. Well, the OPS is better, but again, it's still in a decline.
I agree with that. But again, what are you looking at when it comes to an overall player? The Mets are clearly looking at the overall player, not just because Pete Alonso hits home runs. Like, if they are, they would have signed them already. They're looking at the overall player. Bregman brings more to the table than Pete Alonso overall. At least that in their eyes, not in my eyes, just overall.
That's in what sense, though? Like quantifying that? In what sense?
I think defensively is a big deal with David Stearns. Okay. Not me. Like, sure. Pete Alonso's not a butcher at first base. Him being at first base, he's not a butcher. Analytically, he's not very good in most metrics. He can scoop balls. Wonderful. That's nice. But other things he doesn't do well. His footwork sucks. He can't throw the bags. He still goes after certain balls that he shouldn't go after between his first and second place hole. I think what David Stearns looks at is the offensive production enough to say sign Pete Alonso, even though he's lacking in other areas of the game, or get a guy that you know is going to be great defensively. Yeah, he's not going to give the home run production that Pete Alonso could, but he still provides more overall as a player. And I think David Stearns puts that in a higher regard than Pete Alonso's home runs or the possibility of his home runs. I truly believe that.
But in relation to Bregman and Santander, I also think that he'd probably see an advantage of signing Santander for less years and also having the ability to versatility, putting him at DH, get Winker off the books in 2025, maybe platoon Santander and Nimmo if that's the case right there in left field in the corners, and also pursuing Vlad Jr. so you can move Mark Vientos back to third base. That's how I see it, at least.
But do they want to move Vientos? They keep Vientos at third base though, because it seems like they don't want him there. That's why I think Bregman's more likely. Yeah, because all you keep on hearing every day, another report comes out that the Mets seem like they'll be more willing to move Vientos to first base. They feel confident that he can play first base. Why do they keep saying that if you're not going to bring in somebody who's better defensively? Right? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, because maybe they're not thinking about bringing somebody better in defensively at all. Maybe they're going to just put Ronnie Mauricio there. I don't know.
But he's not ready for the season, though, or for spring at least. So, like,
I mean, for spring training, I don't know. Again, if it goes down that route, it's ugly.
If that's the case, that's a stupid thought process. Then,
like, I don't like it either.
No, it just doesn't make sense. That's why I'm saying, like, if they're putting our opinions aside, right? We different opinion of Bregman and Santander, who would be a better fit. Like, I would agree with you with Santander as a better fit because of the versatility factor. But what Stearns' mind's way he thinks defensively first, which is obvious with the moves he's made over the first year as a Met, running the Mets. It just seems that he values the defense and he believes that putting Bregman or somebody, even Alonso, is going to be a better player putting in between Vientos' bat and Juan Soto's bat. I think he thinks it's going to be an upgrade regardless. offensively. Like, I just feel like that's what he's thinking. Because why is there so many reports that the Mets are so willing to move Vientos out of first base when they can just sign Pete Alonso or trade for Vlad? Like, it's an easy concept. But I mean, maybe they still will trade for Vlad, and it kind of ends that conversation. But they can just sign Pete Alonso and keep Vientos at third base. There's something that they want at third base. Mauricio isn't he. What has he shown at third base defensively? Not much at all. It's not. Where is it? There hasn't been much. And I don't think they're confident in Acuna or Jet Williams going to third base when they've played second, short, and center field in the minor leagues and barely any third base at all. Like, unless they do trade for Arenado, and then, it's the same concept. They're looking defense, and no matter who's between Soto and Vientos, they're going to be productively better offensively because they're in between those two guys. That has to be the thought process.
Yeah, and I don't see. No, I agree. It's a big risk to rely on, Mauricio to even be ready and also just replicate anything close to what Vientos just did. Because again, the body size there, he's got a strong arm just like Vientos does. But again, the footwork needs work. That's a big frame. Yeah. I don't know. I've always thought of Mauricio as a DH, but again, I said the same thing about Vientos to start 2024, and he kind of proved me wrong. Although he wasn't the sure-handed third baseman at all times, the footwork still needed work. I mean, maybe Mauricio turned some heads, but this is why I do think you can get the best of both worlds by striking a deal with the Cardinals for Nolan Arenado. And I'm going to talk about this on a podcast episode. I'm going to release it probably on Sunday, so have the notifications on. We got to talk about all options at this point, because I do think this is the best of both worlds, getting a defensive-minded third baseman and also not needing to go the 6 years for Bregman. And I understand that so many people don't want Nolan Arenado. I understand it, and I understand the reason why. But look at the numbers for Nolan Arenado. Look at what went down for him. The OPS went down, right? And the home runs went down. He had 3 less doubles. He went from 26 to 23, and he had 10 less home runs. Everything else was the same or went up. OBP went up. Batting average went up. And his actual defensive runs saved went up by a large margin. There was a 5 differential in the DRS category from 2023 to 2024. So it was only the home runs that went down with Nolan Arenado. And that's what people don't realize, because they like to look at the OPS and also, the slug.
What Met fans love to talk about, what protection did Nolan Arenado have? right? I can throw that right back. A lot of the Met fans that talk about Pete Alonso had no protection. If Arenado goes between Juan Soto and Vientos, he's going to get better at bats. Let me just, and I'm going to bring up what you just brought up, right? His strikeouts were down by 10, right? His batting average went up, right? His on-base percentage went up. Slugging went down. Okay. OPS went down.
Home runs. Because of the home runs.
Right? Yep. Home runs went down because of the home runs. Exactly. Right. He had, let me see. What the hell was I looking at? He had 23 doubles, which is on par with his all-star season in 2023, right? He didn't hit no triples. That's okay. But he played 152 games, right? He's still great defensively. Like, a lot. You're right. The only numbers that really went down is the home runs, right? But again,
that's it.
Again, St. Louis is not a hitter-friendly ballpark. Citi Field is not either. But again, you're going to see more pitches to hit, right? Who is on this team other than Nolan Arenado? Who is helping him out? Who is his protection, right? And I think I'm allowed to say that when everybody else throws that back at me with Pete Alonso, right? We can't talk about protection for Pete Alonso and act like Arenado is washed up. And he's 33 years old. He's going to be 34. Understandable. But there's no reason why you – and by the way, if you get 71 RBIs, 16 home runs, let's say you get 20 home runs and 80 RBIs.
I think he goes back up to 20 plus.
Okay, let's say he hits 20 home runs, 80 RBIs, batting 270. How many guys did that in the Mets lineup last year? Pete Alonso didn't. Right? His average was way down. Don't give me the home runs. They were very pointless. He had, 80-something RBIs? So he had 13 less RBIs with 20 more home runs than Arenado. So Arenado did more RBI-wise based on less home runs. So let's say he hits 20 home runs, 270, 80 RBIs. That is a lot more than what most of the guys did on the Mets. So you're upgrading as well. So again, let's just do that. Vientos goes to first base. Arenado goes to third. Arenado becomes a Met. So you get Juan Soto, that replaces Pete Alonso with Arenado. 30 home runs, 20 home runs for 30 home runs for Soto, 20 home runs for Arenado. That's 50 home runs. So Pete Alonso, if he hits 40 home runs, that's still 10 home runs more. Better production, deeper the lineup.
But not even that. Let me tell you all why I'm so adamant about this, because the contract has a lot to do with this. I'm not just saying Arenado because but I don't think a lot of people understand the stipulation of Arenado's contract. I don't think people really understand. So I'm gonna just break it down again. I'm gonna break it down once more in an upcoming video, but for simplicity purposes, just so you all can just enter your weekend with this in the back of your minds. Arenado's contract, $32 million. Let's just say this. Let's just dumb it down even further. What's left of his contract is 3 years, $74 million. That's what's left on his contract. It's a descending contract, by the way.
It is.
10 of that 74 million is going to be paid actively by the Colorado Rockies. They are on the books for $5 million in 2025 and $5 million in 2026. So that brings it down to 3 years, around $64 million. The Cardinals just had a deal in place not too long ago before Arenado blocked it to send him to Houston, in which they were willing to cover $15 to $20 million on top of that. Let's say it's $20 million. That brings it down to 3 years, around $45 million. That's $15 million AAV for Nolan Arenado. You're telling me you wouldn't do that, knowing you don't have to send anything significant back in return, because they are that desperate to start their rebuild and get this guy off the books. Oh, and by the way, if you want another elite reliever,
you can do that.
They've got Ryan Helsley. You're going to need to extend him. But if they were already talking about Tanner Scott before the AJ Minter signing,
yeah,
I would be hard pressed to find out that the Mets can't afford Ryan Helsley on a re-sign deal, on an extension after the season. Oh, and by the way, if you want to keep Jose Butto in this bullpen, they also have another guy that's entering the last year of his contract, $7.5 million, very cheap, just posted a season that he had a 3.30 ERA, and Eric Fetty. There's ways. The Cardinals and the Mets make too much sense as a trade partner here. And again, people get scared by looking at the $32 million that Arenado's owed in 2025. It's not going to be $32 million. You take into account what the Cardinals are willing to pay and what the Rockies are already on the books for, and there's some deferments as well in that contract. It's a cheap deal. And by the way, maybe they take on Starling Marte. You can free up that roster spot. It's a no-brainer.
That's a good point, because the Rockies are paying some of that money, and the Cardinals were willing to eat some of that money for the Astros, right? You said, right? They were willing to do that, say $15-20 million. So they would still do that with another team as well. And again, if you can get Helsley in there and you can bring that in there, and even if you don't extend them, let's say you don't, and you just get Helsley for this year, knowing that, look at the bullpen you're going to have. That is another guy that is a closer, that is also a bridge guy as well. So now you got to need elite bullpen. You bring in Arenado in here. And again, I don't know why 16 home runs, 71 RBIs, and 270 average is trash when you're putting them in between Vientos and Soto. It's not trash. You only think he's going to be better with, and the reason why I keep on bringing that up, because people only care about offense. They only care about defense when the guy makes an error in a game. That's the only time they care about it. And people forget how good the Mets defensively were in the field. They were one of the better teams defensively. That was a big reason why they were successful in their 89-win season and a run to the NLCS. That was a big deal. It wasn't just the offense, right? Why do you think the pitching was so good? Our pitchers didn't strike out a ton of guys. Why do you think the pitching was so good? Because the defense behind them was extremely good for most of the year. That's why we're talking about this, right? And the reason why I keep on bringing the offense is because Arenado would have better protection. Met fans love that word. So I'm going to give you, he's going to have better protection in being behind Soto and in front of Vientos. His numbers will probably go up a little bit. I'm not saying he's going to hit 30 home runs and hit 95 RBIs. Maybe he could. Maybe come into a team that has contender type ability and, aspirations for a championship and not a depleted Cardinals team that's looking to rebuild. Maybe he will get that little bit of life left and maybe hit 21, 22 home runs with 270 average and 85 RBIs.
I'm going to take receipts, Rob. I'm going to take receipts of this very live chat, and I'm going to show everybody these receipts, and you guys are more than welcome to go ahead and do the same thing to me. Wherever Nolan Arenado ends up this past season, you watch him have a infinitely better season than he did in 2024. He'll get back to more of the 2023 numbers that he posted. I don't expect him to go back to 2022 version of himself. That's unachievable.
Yeah.
He had like a 890 OPS at that point. He's going to get back to more of the 2023 production. And then people are going to be like, man, I really wish the Mets were in on that deal. I'm dying on this hill. I'm sorry. I'm doing it because it makes sense contractually, situationally, and with my projection for what I see him producing on whichever team in 2025. And I it doesn't surprise me that Mets fans don't want him.
He had 93 RBIs, 26 home runs, about a 262 in 2023, only 2 years ago, right? All I hear Mets fans talk about, and I'm going to keep on bringing Pete Alonso, all they keep on talking about was 2 years ago with Pete Alonso, right? You're allowed to bring up a guy that you would die for in Pete Alonso and bring up 2 years ago, but not going to do it for Nolan Arenado. It's only 2 years ago. And the Cardinals were actually a better team 2 years ago in 2023 than they were last year. So, again, we'll see. And he played less games, by the way, and he hit that. So, again, I think there's still something left in the tank, and I agree with you. And the other thing is, too, why the Mets are more of a possibility for Nolan Arenado, he has a no-trade clause. He gets to pick where he goes and is willing to go. So that can also be an option. Now, I think once Bregman goes, I think Nolan Arenado to the Mets might pick up a little bit more steam.
Yeah.
Maybe it is possible the Mets want a Fetty in there or a Helsley in there just to sweeten the pot a little bit. Maybe they will take on the full contract of Arenado. Say, hey, listen, you don't got to pay a dime for Arenado. We'll take on the whole contract, but you got to give us Helsley. The Mets could do that. They can definitely do that. If they want to make, because remember, the Cardinals want to shed that payroll. They're rebuilding.
So badly, they do. So badly.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, they were willing to pay $15 million just to get the $40+ million off their books. So say to the Cardinals, listen, we'll take Arenado. We'll take the entire dollar amount. You got to give us Helsley. The Cardinals would do that. They're rebuilding. They don't care. If you do that, you get a great defensive third baseman, you get decent production offensively. Even if you get similar numbers from last year, it's better than what the Mets got from most of their offensive team other than Lindor and Vientos, right? Nimmo was a shell of himself. Alonso wasn't very good last year. So you're getting decent production, and you're going to put him between Soto and Vientos, as I said, 400 million times. So we'll see, but there's a lot of different ways to David Stearns to cook to make this roster better. So one of the last topics of the day is next bullpen targets. We kind of briefly brought this up, mostly the bigger names, but in this topic, we're going to briefly talk up the bigger names, but the smaller names is kind of what we're going to talk about here. Who are the smaller names? Robinson, Canely, Stanek. I think Stanek's considered a smaller name compared to Tanner Scott and, Kirby Yates or Helsley for that matter, but that's a trade. Where do you think the Mets are going to go next? Let's put Tanner Scott to the side. Let's say they're not going after him anymore. Let's say they're out on him. 2 more arms. I think the Mets have to get 2 more arms. 2 more arms, where they're going, Chris.
You said 2 more arms in the bullpen.
Yeah. I think that's fair to say, unless you don't think so. You could say it, obviously.
I mean, I think 2 is a little ambitious. I don't. It's not out of the question though, because again, if you have that situation where you want to move Buto to back to the rotation, you don't have any other plans of adding another starter. That makes sense for 2 arms. Right now, I'm gonna say, I don't know why. Just have a gut feeling that they're gonna get Tommy Canley. I have no idea why, but I think that's the move. I think that's the next move right there is Tommy Canley. The changeup is a huge part of his arsenal. It'll probably be a 2-year deal, if I had to imagine. The Yankees, I mean, they've got some mojo with this sort of Yankees, ex-Yankees movement. And again, it's not a bad thing at all. There's familiarity there. They were interested in Jonathan Loaisiga before he went to, back to the Yankees on that 1-year deal. It's certainly plausible. That's funny. That kind of ruined my day, but you know what, Maniac Dodgers, you kind of re-energized my night after the Sasaki news. But yeah, I think Tommy Canley.
It's embarrassing.
Yeah, I think Tommy Canley's the move, and I think that if they go for 2 bullpen arms, I think Stanek is probably in play for a re-sign deal on the 1-year deal. So I would say Canley and Stanek. That's my prediction.
Still pretty good. Like I like Canley. I think he looked good when he came back with the Yankees late in the year. The arm strength is still there. He's still got that power arm. We know Stanek's a maniac and he's good. But again, you're not looking for Stanek to pitch the 8th inning anymore with Minter here. So he's going to be probably a 6th inning guy along with Canley, 6-7 inning guy, along with Nunez as well that we haven't really brought up much, and Ree Garrett. So I think there's a lot to go there, but I agree with you. I still think the Mets are going to get one more pretty high-end arm. One more. I think David Stearns is going to use his might when it comes to the bullpen. I think if he's going to spend money, he's going to spend it on the bullpen. And I wouldn't be shocked if it's Kirby Yates. The only reason why I say that is because I think the fact that getting Minter in here solidifies your back end of the your back end of the bullpen in the 8th and 9th. If you get one more top guy, you kind of give yourself options. As I said earlier in the stream, if you weren't here earlier, you can throw Buto into the rotation, and that solves your 6-man rotation. And you don't have to sign Jack Flaherty. And you can go with Buto, who we think has a lot of upside, who the Mets believe could be a starter. Obviously, last year they threw him as a starter. Now you could really put him as a starter in his 6-man, where you can still protect his innings in that 6-man rotation and get the production as a starter. Sorry, I was looking at something really quick. I'm sorry about that.
No, you're good.
All right, so yeah, guys. I mean, it is what it is when it comes to the bullpen. I trust Stearns with the bullpen 100%. I'm not worried about that at all. No matter who else he brings in, I'm okay with. And I think it's going to be the guys. It's going to be a pair of those guys we mentioned, in my opinion. So, with all those fun topics, almost an hour and a half into the stream, Mets bring back Winker. They sign Minter back into the bullpen's pretty damn good. We didn't really bring up prospects. I kind of talked prospects. Chris kind of left it alone, but the offer that I gave, he said he would do. So, Stearns, if you're listening, you listen to AJ Minter, do it. Santander, Bregman, we kind of disagreed on is Bregman a better option or Santander. We did. Chris did also bring up Arenado as a possible option. We'll see. I think
not our one option. That's what I wanted to stipulate here and sort of caveat is that we don't want Arenado as the number 1 option. All we're saying is that it makes situational sense if Bregman's off the market. If they can't get Santander, it makes sense as a last ditch pivot point. That's all that was.
There you go. And of course, we'll see if that again. I think it's going to be one more bat in the lineup. If it's going to be Santander, Bregman, Arenado, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., there's going to get one more bat in here. Who's that's going to? Maybe even Pete Alonso still. Who knows? But out of those names, I think that one of those guys are going to happen. And of course, last but not least, our favorite topic of the day is the rapid fire time where we ask each other questions. If you're new to the channel, thank you for showing up. Subscribe to the channels, hit that like button as we're got a ton of people in the chat today on X and on the streams on both channels. All right, Chris, I got one question for you. I wish I would have told you that one earlier, but that's all right. It's okay. I have to go a little. I'm going to go back to Pete Alonso because it's a great topic. Pete Alonso comes back to the Mets, yes or no? Crawls back to the Mets.
Oh, man. I've been adamant and I've been pretty consistent with this pretty much all off season long. I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say that he does come back to the Mets. They're going to come back to the Mets regardless. I truly believe that they're going to get their best offer. And I still think he comes back to the Mets, whether people want it or not, whether they can see that path or not. Yes, this is not even false hope, not even false optimism, because at this point, again, there's different routes the Mets can take to make their lineup just as good. And if Vlad Jr. is the end game, that's completely okay too. If that's who the Mets I've identified via trade or free agency next offseason that they want to get as their next first baseman, then so be it. My question to you is, how many? Okay, first of all, it's a two-part question. Question. Is Brett Beatty still a New York Met by the time? Excuse me, my damn throat. I've been coughing up a lung over here. Is Brett Beatty still a New York Met by the time this offseason rolls around, or is concluded, I should say? And if he is, how many games does he start for the New York Mets in 2025? Be as realistic as possible, because again, we're talking Bregman. Do you think that they're going to sign Bregman to a long-term deal? We're talking Arenado. Is that trade going to happen? You know, if Ronnie Mauricio isn't ready, I mean, Brett Beatty is the guy that's been here. Maybe he gets another shot. I don't want to see it. I'll say this right now. I don't want to see it, but I wouldn't put it past the New York Mets, to be honest with you.
I think all that, if the Mets are leaking out, they're going to go internally with third base to move Vientos to first base. Guess what little book uses that all the time? We talk about it all the time. Brian Cashman, how he hypes his players up. Oh, remember, they were going to use that prospect second baseman before they traded them to get, who is it? Williams, right? Why do you don't think the Mets are hyping their prospects up a little bit and hyping Beatty up a little bit, maybe to bump up his value a little bit? Just because Met fans don't believe Beatty's any good doesn't mean nobody else think they can change him around, right? Hyping him up a little bit. Oh yeah, we can use Beatty at third base to move Vientos to first base, right? Because they still believe in him. Maybe they really don't, but they're trying to hype him up a little bit through the media. The same thing goes for Mauricio and Acuna, even though I don't think he needs much taken, but still they're trying to do that. So I'm going to say Brett Beatty's going to play 0 games. He might actually be in the Arenado trade just to get rid of him. You know, throw him in there just for, you know, if you have to get Halsey and you have to give something up. Beatty's probably that guy, right? Mm-hmm. You could do that. Or I think Beatty's going to be in some type of trade package. If it's for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. or an Arenado, or just giving him up just from maybe a lowly bullpen piece that you might use, maybe a journeyman lefty or something like that. You could do that. But I'm going to say no. And what was the other part of that question? Was it Bregman?
Oh, well, if you say no, then I was going to ask you how many games does he start in 2025. Yeah, but you're saying no.
No. Big fat 0.
Okay. I respect that. that.
All right, guys. So, Chris, you got something else? I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say it's a great stream, and just check out all the standalone content. Subscribe to both channels. Again, we appreciate the engagement. I mean, you guys, don't have to always agree with us, but the fact that you guys are taking time out of your Friday nights to start your weekend means the world to us. And again, we appreciate the support. So smash the thumbs up. It was a great stream, and we covered a lot of topics here. And I think in an hour and a half, we did a pretty damn good job with how many topics we really got to. So,
Yeah, I thought this was going to be a 2-hour stream considering the topics. But again, the first 2 topics were kind of, well, hey, we signed these guys. But with that said, guys, thank you for tuning in to episode 27 of the Mets Hot Stove. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. We got Chris over 2K. Great job by you guys. Great job by Chris with his continuous work and all those videos he puts out there continuously every day. So make sure you tell your friends to subscribe to the channels, guys. With that said, guys, Mets Hot Stove, another one in the books. Hopefully, the next time we have a hot stove, we're talking about another signing, and we have a whole bunch more to talk about with roster construction. With that said, guys, have a great night. Let's go Mets, and we'll see you next time on the Mets Hot Stove. So have a good night, guys.
Mets.
Good night.
City lights in the dead of night, full of echo. Concrete jungle, trees bust to grow. Mets in the air, chase glory, no fear. Broken backs, but hearts steer clear. OMG, the chaos, what a scene. Streets buzzing like a machine. Critters from the shadows, chills on my spine.